Hi everyone, this is Irma, and welcome to my Geometry Dash icon building tutorial. I will be going over everything you need to know to get started using Adobe Animate to make icons for official icon contests or just for fun. There will be a troubleshooting section at the end of this video, followed by a couple live walkthroughs of icon making, so stick around for that. I'll also try to answer any questions I see in the comments, so feel free to leave one if there's something you'd like to know or don't understand. Let's get started. We're going to be using RobTop's icon template. I'll leave a download link in the description. You can see here that there's a template for every game mode, including the swing. If I zoom in on the cube here, you can see the 4 layers, called symbols, that make up any icon. Adobe Animate works with these symbols. They're essentially mini drawings that can be reused multiple times within the document, and editing any symbol will edit any copies of that symbol too. On the left is the Player 1 color symbol. This one includes all of the icon's line art and shading. Any white that's in this layer will be automatically converted to the Player 1 color in-game and in the previews here. To the right of Player 1 is the Player 2 symbol. This layer will typically only include white shapes since the line art is already present in the Player 1 symbol. As with before, everything that's white in the symbol will be converted into the Player 2 color. Next, we have Glow. This will also be converted to Player 2 color in-game, assuming the player selects the Glow option. Finally, we have the Extra layer. Nothing in this symbol is converted to any player color, making this the layer to include any white you want in your icon. This is how RobTop includes extra details like white teeth or eyes. Some artists like to keep all shading in this layer, but I personally prefer to keep that in Player 1. You should always remember that in these 6 previews and in-game, these 4 layers are stacked on top of each other in a certain order. The Glow is placed behind everything, and going up we have Player 2, Player 1, and then Extra. Now that we've gone over the basic structures of icon templates, let's begin drawing. Here's how it'll work. First, we draw our icon's line art in the Player 1 layer. The template should give you a feel for where the icon's hitbox is in-game, so try not to make your icon too much bigger than that. Once we're happy with the line art, we can set up all the colors, add the glow, add shading, or white highlights, all of which I'll go over later in the video, and then we're done. To edit a symbol, double-click on it. When editing a symbol, Adobe Animate grays out anything outside of it. By double-clicking, we are now inside of the symbol, which means that any edits we make to it will be reflected in its copies in the preview icons to the right. If you like, you can experiment by playing around with the symbol to see how it'll affect the preview icons. I begin by deleting the white center in order to give me an estimate of the icon's hitbox. To do so, simply select it and press backspace. Now we have to convert this outline into our guide. To do this, I first gray out the outline by selecting Properties, Objects, then bringing the fill opacity down to 30% or so. I then select the lock button for the selected drawing layer at the bottom left of the screen. Keep in mind that layers inside of symbols are unique to that symbol, meaning different symbols have their own set of layers. To avoid confusion, I'll stick to referring to these layers inside of symbols as drawing layers. Once you click the lock, you won't be able to move around or edit the layer, which is what we want to make things easier. Now, create a new drawing layer by clicking the plus button. We can now draw our icon while using the previous outline as a reference. But how exactly do we draw our icon? I'll go over some of the most important tools used to draw icons in Adobe Animate. For this tutorial, I'll be referencing tools by their keyboard shortcuts, but you can also find all of these tools in your toolbar to the left. Keep in mind that each individual tool has its own specific properties in the Properties tab, which will only show up when you have that tool selected. You can take out the line drawing tool by pressing N. Go to Properties, Tool, and set the stroke to black and 100% opacity. As for stroke size, most in-game icons will stick to a size 3 for outside lines and 2 for inside lines. For now, just use 2 for everything, and we'll use an easy technique later on to change the outside. You can now click and drag to create a line. By holding Shift as you drag, you can force your line to stay horizontal, vertical, or at a 45-degree angle. If you press V to go back to the Move tool, you can move around the endpoints of your line. If you click and drag on the middle of your line, you can curve it around. If you hold down Control while doing this, it will drag out a new point on that line rather than just curving it. By crossing 2 lines, a new point will be made at their intersection. You can use this to your advantage. By crossing 2 lines and deleting the overhang, you can connect 2 lines up with each other fairly seamlessly. To practice, just try this out for a little while and see what you can do with it. Understanding how to use the line tool is essential. Just make sure to use the outline as a reference. You can go past it, but don't do too far or too often. The brush tool can also be useful, especially if you have a drawing tablet, but it's important to understand that brush strokes are not lines. They are the same type of object as the center of a rectangle, meaning you cannot edit their points like you would a line. Press B to use the brush, then edit the settings just like we did with the line. Black, 100% opacity, and a stroke size of 2. If you have a drawing tablet, feel free to also edit the minimum stroke size. Using a tablet to have varying pressure can add a personal touch to an icon if done right. If you do want to use pressure, make sure the pressure tool in the left side of the screen is highlighted. Unlike pixel-based programs like Adobe Photoshop, Animate will automatically smoothen out brush strokes for you, whether or not you're using a tablet, which is really handy. Adobe Animate also comes with many shape tools that can prove quite handy for icon drawing. If you press R, you can select the rectangle tool. Simply click and drag anywhere and you'll make a rectangle. By holding Shift as you drag, you can lock your rectangle to a square shape. In order to make a rectangle with only the outline, which is what we'll want most of the time, be sure to select None for the fill in your properties, or you can just be like me and delete the fill after you draw it. Then select the entire outline by double-clicking and edit the settings as we just did twice before. This rectangle consists of 4 lines put together, the same type of line we drew previously, and they behave as such. You can drag around the corners, or click and drag the middle of lines to curve them or to make a new point. Just like the lines we've drawn before, intersecting lines will have points at their intersections, meaning if you drag a rectangle on top of other lines, you'll create many more points than you might have intended. Sometimes you might want this, but if you don't, you can create your rectangle on a new drawing layer where the lines won't interact with your previous ones. Be sure to use layer locking features as necessary to prevent layers from being edited. You can lock and unlock layers at any time. You can also delete a selected layer by pressing this trash can button. The circle tool functions practically identically to the rectangle tool. Press O to bring it up, click and drag, optionally holding Shift, delete the center, edit the settings, etc. The only real difference is that circles are made up of 8 points, all of which already have curvature to them. So if you click and drag part of it using the Move tool, it'll warp the circles in ways you might not immediately expect. By holding Alt as you draw a circle, you can make the cursor its center rather than the corner. This works with other tools as well. Another quick tip is that if you ever want to erase part of a line without deleting the whole thing, it's pretty simple. You can just select a portion and press Delete. One of the most powerful tools in your arsenal is the Align tab. If you don't see it in the top right, go to Window and click Align. You can use aligning to make shapes go in specific places on your icon. Something to keep in mind about alignment tools is that the center of the stage will really mean the center of the symbol while inside one, meaning this can be used to align shapes to the center of your icon. For example, I can select this circle, making sure that Align to Stage is checked, and then I can hit Align Vertical Center so it'll align perfectly vertically. I can then hold Shift as I drag the circle and bring it anywhere I like. If you press Align Vertical Center as well as Align Horizontal Center, the circle, or whatever shape you have, will go precisely in the middle of your icon. You can experiment with the other 4 buttons up here to see what they do. Also keep in mind that you can use the arrow keys to move around a selected shape in increments. This is super useful when making sure a line or shape is just at the edge of an outline. If you want to make sure it's just at the edge, you can unlock the Outlines drawing layer and bring the opacity back up. You can see here that my lines are overlapping just a little bit, so I know to bring those a little bit back. You can also press this eyeball button on the outline layer to see what your icon looks like on its own without the default outline. Now, what if you want to align multiple separate shapes as if they're one? Because if you draw 2 lines, select them, and try the Align buttons, they'll align independently rather than as a whole. This is one of the many places where groups come in. If you press Ctrl G, any selected shapes will group together and function as one object. You can align them and then undo the grouping, called breaking apart, with Ctrl B. Now, a couple of notes regarding symbols before we move on. If at any point you click on a piece of your icon and this blue outline appears, that means you've gone outside of your layer, and so anything you put down now will not show up in the previews. To fix this, simply double-click to get back into it. If you've already drawn some stuff while outside the layer that you don't want to lose, what you can do is select these things, press Ctrl X to copy and delete, go back into the symbol, press Ctrl V to place it again, and move it to where it was before. Before we move on to color, we need to thicken up the outer perimeter of the icon by 1 pixel. Make sure you're happy with all of the shapes at this point because we won't be able to go back. By the way, I'll show you how to make symmetrical icons like the one on screen later in the video, so don't worry about that for now. Double check that you're inside of the Player 1 symbol, then delete the original outline layer. Then select your entire icon. Go into Properties, Object, and click this Expand to Fill button. By doing this, we convert all of our lines and shapes into fill, so it cannot be easily edited like before. Take out your ink bottle tool with S, set the stroke to black with a size of 1, and click the very outer edge of your icon. The perimeter should get just a little bit thicker, which is what we want. Now we can move on to color. Double-click outside the symbol so you exit it. The previews should ungray out. Select your symbol and either copy and paste it or do the same thing by holding Alt and clicking and dragging. Keep one of your copies where it was, and take the other aside. Break up this one with Ctrl B until there are no blue outlines and all of the lines are selected like so. We already expanded to fill before, so we don't need to do it again now. Take out the paint bucket tool with K. Make sure that white is selected with 100% opacity. In Geometry Dash, every icon has a primary and secondary color, Player 1 and Player 2. You're going to want to fill in with your paint bucket anywhere you want your primary color, Player 1, to be, like so. Then go back to your Move tool with V, select every white section by holding Shift and clicking each, and then drag those aside. When setting up the color, there's a common problem with the colors not 100% filling up their spaces, and instead leaving a 1 or 2 pixel gap. To prevent this, we're going to make our Player 1 color 2 pixels thicker. We can use the ink bottle tool like earlier, but a faster way to do it is to make sure that all of the white shapes are selected, then go to Modify, Shape, Expand Fill, and Expand Fill 2 pixels. It should get a little bit thicker as you see here. If it completely breaks any of the shapes, you'll know when you see it, then refer to the troubleshooting section later in the video. Now group up all of the white shapes with Ctrl G and use Ctrl X to copy and delete. Go back into your Player 1 symbol and make a new drawing layer. Bring this new drawing layer to the bottom of the list and paste in your new color. You can now use the Align tools to bring it to the center. Make sure that Align to Stage is checked. If it's a bit off, you can use your mouse or the arrow keys to perfect it. The reason we created this new drawing layer for the color is because it's thicker than it should be. If we had put it on top, it would overlap the outline, which wouldn't be good. If you double-click out of the symbol and look at your previews, you can now see that the Player 1 color is all filled in. This is also a good time to hide the extra layer. We don't need it yet, and it just gets in our way. Double-click into it, select the square, and simply set the opacity to 0. Doing this instead of just deleting it means we can still go into it later. Now go back into the fill outline we used to make the Player 1 color. Use the paint bucket tool like before to fill in wherever you want the Player 2 color to be. Make sure that the fill and opacity are correct, white and 100%. Select them all by shift-clicking with the Move tool, drag them out, go to Modify, Shape, and Expand Fill, 2 pixels, and then group them up with Ctrl G. Ctrl X to copy and delete, go into your Player 2 color symbol, delete the square that's there, paste in your color 2, and align it to the center. Looking good. I went over that rather quickly, but if you need a refresher, just look at the Player 1 color part again as the process is basically identical. Solid colors like these are nice, but what if you want a gradient? Well, that's pretty easy. When you're making your Player 1 color, go over to the Color tab while the Paint Bucket tool is selected. If you don't see it, enable it in Window at the top. Make sure that the Paint Bucket button is selected in this tab rather than the stroke, then click on Solid Color and change it to Linear Gradient. Now look at the bar at the bottom. Click on this little square on the left and select white. Click on this right square and set it to white as well, but this time set opacity to 0. If you accidentally click somewhere else on the line and create another square, simply click and drag it down and it'll go away. Now when you use the Paint Bucket tool, it'll paste a gradient from white to transparent. If you want the gradient to go in the opposite direction, you can simply swap which little white square is white and which is transparent. But if you want the gradient to go vertically instead of horizontally, you're going to have to rotate the entire fill outline beforehand. Select the entire outline, right-click, transform, and then rotate either 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. Now you can put on the gradient, then select everything here and rotate it back. To finish the gradient, simply put white in the Player 2 layer wherever the gradient is. So essentially what's happening is that this whole piece of the icon is the Player 2 color, and as the section of the Player 1 color slowly goes to transparent to white, the end result section will go slowly from Player 2 color to Player 1 color. Next up is the glow layer. This is actually really easy. Go back to your Lineart shape we used to make the colors and take out the ink bottle tool with S. Set the stroke to white, opacity 100 with a stroke size of 4. Click the very edge of your icon like so, and a thick outline should appear around the perimeter. Double-click this outline with the Move tool and hit Ctrl X to once again copy and delete. Go into the glow layer symbol, delete what's there, paste your new glow, and align it to the center. Again, if it's a little bit off in the previews, you can use the arrow keys to inch it into place. Our very first icon is almost there. Now I'm going to show you how to add on shading. Go into your Player 1 symbol and make a new drawing layer. I recommend locking the other ones. Take out your line tool with N and set the stroke color to black with a size of 2. However, this time, set the opacity anywhere from about 20% to 30%. I personally use 20% when I want the shading to be subtle, 30% when I want to make a 3D effect, and 25% for all else. Now, you can just draw wherever you want the shading to be. Don't worry about these shading lines overlapping over your black outlines, it won't affect anything since it's already black. Just shade anywhere you think will look good, you can always change it later. Keep in mind that you can curve shading lines just like everything else. You can also shade using circles, rectangles, etc. Just don't overuse shading or the icon will look bad. Once you're happy with your shading, click out of the symbol to see how it looks in the previews. Keep editing until you're happy with it. The final step is to add white and/or white highlights. Just like shading, this part is optional, but it's good to know how to do it. Go back to your shape we used to make the glow and the color, making sure you're not inside any symbols, and create a new drawing layer. Go to the line tool, set the stroke to white and 100% opacity. Draw anywhere you want white or white highlights, and once again, don't worry about overlapping. When you're done, here's what you do. Select everything that's not a white highlight and hit Ctrl-C to copy. You can also use Ctrl-X, it doesn't matter. Select all the white and hit Expand to fill, and then paste and place by using Ctrl-Shift-V. Now, if you select all the white and drag it aside, you'll see that the shapes perfectly go around the outline. Group them up with Ctrl-G, then copy and delete with Ctrl-X. Go into the extra symbol we previously made invisible, delete the square, paste in your white, and align it. With these especially, you'll likely have to use your arrow keys to move them into the perfect position before breaking them apart with Ctrl-B. Finally, everything that you want to be a highlight rather than pure white, select and bring down the opacity. I would recommend between 30 and 50%, but do some experimenting to see what works with your icon. So this is looking good. We now have everything an icon needs. However, there's more ways to make an icon in Animate that I haven't talked about yet. This is where we get into Symmetry. If you want to make icons that look like these ones, you'll need to know how to set up Symmetry. So with a brand new copy of the template file, let's do this. Go to the Player 1 symbol and delete the white as usual. Add a new drawing layer and lock the old one. Draw a square of any size. Again, use the rectangle tool while holding Shift. Then delete the stroke so you just have the fill. Click Align Right Edge and Align Vertical Center. Go into Properties, Object, and hit Convert to Symbol, or just press the F8 key. Hit OK, and then copy and paste this new symbol. Press Align Left Edge and then Align Vertical Center. Right-click this new symbol, go under Transform, and click Flip Horizontal. Now go into either symbol by double-clicking, then delete the white. You'll notice that the white is also deleted from the other side. Now you can just start drawing, and you'll see that anything you do to one side will be done to the other, flipped horizontally. You can see how I can make a quick smiley face by first making a circle for the eyes, then the smile using a curved line. You can double-click outside of the symbol to go back to the Player 1 symbol, and here you can add other things as usual that won't be copied and flipped. What if you want to make a 4x symmetrical icon like this cube here? Well, it's a very similar process. Go into the Player 1 symbol, delete the white, add a new drawing layer, and lock the old one. Draw a square, delete the stroke, align it to the right edge along vertical center, convert it to a symbol with F8, copy and paste it. But now, instead of aligning it to the right edge, we're going to align it to the bottom edge, then along the horizontal center. Right-click, transform, then hit 90 degrees clockwise, or just use the hotkey Ctrl-Shift-9. Copy and paste this one, align left edge, then align vertical center, and then the same thing. Right-click, transform, rotate 90 degrees clockwise, and then finally copy this one, align it to top edge, align horizontal center, and rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Now you can go into any of the 4 symbols, delete the white, and you'll see again that the white from every symbol will be deleted. Start drawing and it'll be rotated around the icon. What I recommend doing is setting up multiple template files for yourself so you don't have to redo the symbol stuff every time. Just make sure there's something inside the symbols like so you can easily click back into them upon starting a new icon. In order to make the colors and setup glow for symmetrical icons, the process of creating the fill outline we did before is slightly different. After we copy and paste our entire Player 1 symbol layer, we can't just fully break it apart. Well, we can, but it often won't work right. Something or other will be broken. The fix to this is pretty easy. Take the copied symbol, go into it, and then go into one of the multiple inner symbols. Select everything and make sure there's no fills, just lines. You'll be able to tell if there's any fills because something will be dotted that shouldn't be in your outline. Delete any of those, reselect all of the lines in this inner symbol, and hit Expand to Fill. Double-click out to go back one symbol, and if you put anything out here, such as a circle in the middle, expand to fill that as well. Then, still inside of your Player 1 symbol, select everything and break it apart until you see no blue lines. Then expand to fill once more just to be sure. And then add 1 pixel to the outer perimeter with the ink bottle tool like we did earlier. With the icon on screen right now, I'm just using the default outline, so I don't need to do this. Now go all the way outside the symbol with a double click, select the whole thing, and break it apart until everything is dotted with no blue rectangles. Hit expand to fill once more, and you're good to go. Keep in mind to only set up the fill outline to start working on the colors once you're sure you're finished with the line art, as doing this step will make it very difficult to go back and change anything. One final note when working with symmetrical icons is that when you want to make shading, an easy technique is after everything else is done, go into the Player 1 symbol, make a new layer, and redo the symmetry making process, and now you can put in your shading here and have it copied over. The final note I have for you before the troubleshooting section and the icon drawing examples is that different game modes have different line thicknesses. For this cube, we use 2 for the inside and 3 for the outside, but that isn't universal. Shown on screen now is a list of all of the line thicknesses you need to worry about. Keep in mind that the outer line values is not the amount you add with the ink bottle tool, but rather the total thickness. So to calculate how much you add with the ink bottle tool while thickening your icon perimeter, subtract the inner thickness from the outer thickness. Remember though that these are estimates rather than clear-cut rules. If a different value than what's here looks better for your icon, then go for it. Troubleshooting. There are some things I've said to do in this tutorial that might not always work perfectly. The biggest thing is that sometimes your outline will completely break when you try to expand to fill. When you have a Player 1 outline symbol that just isn't behaving, try this. Go into every individual drawing layer in the Player 1 symbol and expand to fill individually. Once you've done that, go back out of the symbol, select the whole thing, and try again. If you're making a symmetrical icon, a common problem is that when you try to expand to fill the innermost Player 1 symbol, it'll break, often in the form of many of your lines simply disappearing. My fix to this is to select the lines or shapes around the problem area, Ctrl X, then make a new drawing layer and Ctrl Shift V, then expand to fill each layer individually. You'll often have to do this a few times to get it to work, so you might end up with 4 or 5 drawing layers here, but it will eventually work. Another issue is similar. When you're trying to expand the fill on your colors to thicken them, your color shapes just break. There's 3 potential solutions to this. You can use the ink bottle tool on the very outer edge of each shape to add 2 pixels, or you can select the shapes individually and expand fill them instead of having all of them selected at once. Or you can try expand filling 1 pixel at a time instead of 2 all at once. Another common issue is accidentally using your only copy of the Player 1 symbol to create your fill outline to make colors, and so you can't go back into the Player 1 symbol. Alternatively, maybe you still have the Player 1 symbol, but it doesn't seem to be linked to the icon previews anymore. To get another working copy of the symbol, you can hold Alt and click and drag one of your previews. Then select Properties, Object, scroll down to Color Effects, and set it from Advanced to None, and now you have your symbol back. So that should be everything. At this point, I'm going to make a couple of example icons using the techniques shown in this video, while walking through the entire process of each. I'll do 1 cube, as well as 1 UFO and 1 ball, so that you can see the process in action with other game modes. Before I leave you with that, please remember to like and subscribe if you found this useful. Thank you for watching, and I'll leave you all with the walkthroughs. Okay, so it turns out if I include the walkthroughs in this video, it will be about an hour long, so I'm going to upload them to my second channel. There is a link in the description to this, and I will put a card in the top right corner, so you can click over to that if you want to see the walkthroughs. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day and that you have success with icon creating.